Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. Today is Wednesday the 13th of July 2022. Thank you for joining us on this very hot evening across the British Isles, and in this programme today we'll be talking about an unprecedented security briefing by both the head of the FBI and the head of MI5 talking about the grave security threat posed by the Communist Party of China, and we'll be discussing how China is proving to be a massive threat to Western security. Reagan, it's great to see you, and it's great to be doing another programme on Behind the Headlines with you, particularly as we discuss the growing security threat that China is posing to the West, and the fact that we've had the head of the FBI, the head of MI5 last week giving an unprecedented media security briefing to warn about the threat posed by China.
Well, it's significant, Simon. We did discuss a measure of this over a year ago now. It's definitely been something that has been on our radar to some degree. And the question that I have is, why is it that our security agencies have only just now expressed grave concern as to the security threat when many people around the world have been quite aware, I think, of what's been going on, not least because of some of the technology that we see being developed in China, the social credit system, which we see even some of our governments fiddling around with similar concepts. So it definitely is something that has been building up, and now it is a good thing that our security agencies are recognizing it. I'm here on the FBI page at the moment, and they have a whole part of their website dedicated to what they call the China threat. And they have produced a full documentary that's about 40 minutes long that is meant to educate businesses, meant to educate those in the private sector to recognize the urgent need to protect intellectual property against sustained and ongoing industrial espionage by China. They are not just viewing this as a part of what they need to be doing in their daily task of keeping the United States safe. They say that confronting this threat by the government of China and the Chinese Communist Party, the threat which they define is primarily to the economic well-being and democratic values even of the United States, confronting this threat is the FBI's top counterintelligence priority. Pretty severe wording.
Absolutely, but do you also think this is a kind of reminder to governments and the media not to there's been too much, and rightly so, focus on Ukraine with the awful Russian invasion that's taken everyone's attention, it's taken the media attention, it's taken our political leaders, what's left of them, attention to deal with this crisis, so that they are refocused and say, look, we really need to deal with this threat, particularly if we see that China invades Taiwan, and they're calling this the biggest economic catastrophe ever to hit the world. If China invades Taiwan, the disruption to world trade would be absolutely horrific. I think you've got problems now with the war in Ukraine. They think this would just be magnified. So maybe it's a reminder to governments around the world, don't lose focus on the real threat that is the Communist Party of China.
Well, to use a cliche, China has not exactly been a sleeping dragon. They've been pretty overt in their intentions, and probably because of the fickleness of media and distance as well, we've chosen to focus more on Russia and Ukraine. Russia even, some people say, has a greater threat to the United States, of course, because Alaska is very, very close to Russia. If you look at the globe and you look at the distance, I believe it's only about 15 kilometers, miles, something like that, from Russian territory. So there are some in the US who speculate, well, if Russia gets very angry with this, they could potentially come and seize Alaska.
Russia owned Alaska one stage.
They did indeed. Yeah. They did indeed. So why not take it back, right? Because they arguably owned that whole patch that is Ukraine once upon a time, and even more of that region. And indeed, that is what is inspiring them to go on this quest to restore the Holy Russian Empire, so to speak. But in this particular situation, China, well, it's just that further distant. The Taiwan situation, people are aware of it, but will it really impact us? And as we even on this program and others had people saying, well, does Russia invading Ukraine, will it really impact us? We're seeing it impacting us in a severe way. Just wait till China invades Taiwan. What we're seeing at the moment, though, and should it come as any surprise, viewers, we've been talking about this for at least a year. Simon, we've been speaking about the potential and the reality as we are in the end times of World War III. This is biblical, right? Whether it's happening right now, we can say at this exact moment, that's not what we're experiencing. There are a few things to come first. But I believe that we're seeing the pieces of the puzzle really laid out on the table at the moment. We have a powder keg that's waiting to blow up, where we could see quite easily the entire world once more engulfed in war.
Absolutely, and Jesus did talk about wars and rumours of wars in Matthew 24 in the Olivet Discourse. Now, the FBI Director Christopher Wray and his British counterpart Ken McCallum were speaking at MI6 headquarters in Thames House London last week, and spoke about our security agency spoke about how they've doubled their work against the Chinese activities in the past 3 years. And Wray, the FBI director, warned that China was the biggest long-term threat to our economic and national security and had interfered in politics, including recent elections. The FBI director also warned of the dangers posed to the world of a Chinese military invasion of Taiwan, said that it would represent one of the most horrific business disruptions the world has ever seen. He also warned that China had deployed cyber espionage to cheat and steal on a massive scale, with hacking program larger than that of every major country, and saying it's time that the West woke up to the threat of China. So our big question for tonight's program is, are we taking the Chinese security threat seriously? So we are live and interactive tonight. I know it's hot, but we very much like your views and opinions.
Now, it's interesting that there's recognition there that China has interfered in some way already in politics, including recent elections, and perhaps at some point we'll see that fleshed out a little bit more as to how significant that has been and what consequences that has had in impacting. We've even seen in the past year a spy who was captured, who was working in the Houses of Parliament. Incredible. The sort of thing that you can read of in novels or watch in spy-based movies, it's actually happening in this way. Now, this is why the FBI director has given this warning that, that increasingly they are discovering that China is embedding itself through various individuals using espionage techniques into society. So now it's significant, this event that we're speaking of, this joint event by the head of FBI and MI5. It was the first ever joint public security appearance by the two directors at the MI5 headquarters in Thames House in London. So it's a significant, you could say, historic occasion. The FBI Director Christopher Wray warned that this is the biggest long-term threat to economic and national security, and the MI5 has agreed with that. So this isn't just a US matter, this is a UK matter. You could say arguably that for the whole of Western civilization. Arguably, you could look at Chinese growth across the world, what it owns, the territories that it's purchased, businesses that it has control of. It has immense control in Africa. It has immense control in South America. It's spread itself in a very significant way. So it really should not come as any surprise that there's been something insidious behind all of this.
Absolutely, and also the fact that President Trump, when he was in power, warned about the dangers of China and wasn't taken seriously. So now it's taken the Biden administration finally to speak up on this issue. Well, certainly Christopher Wray is the FBI director, is talking about this serious threat. We know also that, for example, that Joe Biden himself and his son, Hunter Biden, are very much in the clutches of the Chinese regime. So they won't be doing their bidding anytime. So the whole situation looks really messy. But in this security briefing, they talk about here that regarding the disruption of world trade, we've seen China looking for ways to insulate their economy against the potential sanctions, trying to cushion themselves from harm if they do anything to draw the ire of the international community, i.e. Chinese invasion of Taiwan. It says, in our world, we call that kind of behavior a clue. Western businesses have already racked up 59 billion, so that's 49.5 billion of losses in Russia because of the invasion of the Ukraine. Wray said that if China does invade Taiwan, we could say the same thing again at a much larger scale. He said that Western investments in China built over the years could become hostages, capital stranded, supply chains and relationship disrupted. He said that's not just geopolitics, that's business forecasting. And they say that China now is the number one on the agenda for our Western security agents.
He went on to say that while intelligence agencies are straining every sinew to support Ukraine in resisting appalling overt aggression, the greater long-term threat is indeed coming from Beijing. Referring to an intelligence sharing group made up of the UK, US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, Mr. McCallum said that China is the top Five Eyes Heads agenda. He added that the most game-changing challenge we have come from, and it comes from an increasingly authoritarian Chinese Communist Party. He then went on to indicate that the challenge posed by the Chinese Communist Party is game-changing, describing it in words of immense and breathtaking. So this truly does seem to have shocked the security agencies in regard to the scale of it, and it's something that we should be paying attention to, definitely. Dory says UK is catching up quick with China's social credit system. A politician has suggested, in addition to the online safety bill, a point system, the telling of truth by individuals on online platforms. So try stating that Jesus is the only way to the Father, you'll probably get grounded for life. Shalom and Maranatha, thank you for your comment there.
Yeah. Thank you, Dory. That was really great contribution to the program.
And John has said, oh, that we could get back to the good old days when the world seemed to be at peace. I can't remember the last time. Do you remember the last time? I mean, you mentioned bring back Donald Trump, but even then, John.
Well, actually, I think that was the nearest time we ever got to world peace in generations was under President Trump. I don't think. I mean, he targeted, I think, an assassination of Soleimani, the Iranian IRGC general. But on the whole, he carried out a few, helped the Kurds against ISIS and a few others, but in
attempts to make peace with North Korea, that was great.
In terms of any kind of military engagement, you know, for the administration was nothing. Obviously, what Biden has done now is just inflamed the situation, particularly in regards to Afghanistan. So we have these excellent two CBN news reports to go to now. The first one is over a year old, and it's called "Is War with China Coming?" And then followed by a more recent one, expert warning, China's arsenal is much larger than predicted. And this is why we need to be concerned about the threat posed by China.
Showing a simulated attack on America's Air Force Base on the island of Guam. Meanwhile, during a simulated attack on a Pacific island this week, U.S. military personnel wore this patch on their uniforms, showing a drone over China. The war drums in the Pacific are building. With the U.S. standing up to Chinese expansionism in the South China Sea and fighting back against China's attack on the American economy and its security, it's raised fears the two nations could be headed for a military showdown. Some say China has sought to dominate an economically weak post-COVID-19 world through increasingly aggressive behavior. 20 Indian soldiers were killed this summer in a surprise cross-border attack by the Chinese army. China has clashed with its neighbors in the South China Sea by claiming most of it for itself, and there are fears of war between China and Taiwan. China has been looting the U.S. of intellectual property and military secrets on a colossal scale. FBI Director Christopher Wray says his bureau is opening a new Chinese espionage case every 10 hours.
The greatest external threat that the United States faces over the medium and long term is the threat by the regime in China today, the Chinese Communist Party, led by General Secretary Xi Jinping.
And Secretary of State Pompeo says China is set on world domination. But he says the Trump administration is determined to stop it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Nuclear advancements are getting the most attention. According to this year's report, China will have at least 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030, a much more aggressive pace than predicted in last year's report. Even so, some experts believe China's true arsenal is actually much bigger.
Beijing has not been willing to talk to the U.S. As we talked, for instance, to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. China is just refused to have any discussions about arsenal size, arms control, all the rest of it. So we have to assume the worst. And I think that we should assume that China has far more than 1,000 now.
According to this year's report, estimates about the number of ballistic missiles in China's arsenal are also up. And in August, Beijing is believed to have started testing a hypersonic weapon, something Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, called very close to being a Sputnik moment, referring to the 1957 Soviet satellite launch, which beat the U.S. to outer space.
We have a case here of a country that is becoming extraordinarily powerful, that wants to revise the international order to their advantage. That's going to be a real challenge over the coming years, in next 10, 20 years. That's going to be really significant.
While many of these military advancements have already been developed by the U.S., it's the speed in which China is accomplishing them that's most concerning.
We're witnessing one of the largest shifts in global geostrategic power that the world has witnessed.
Beijing is using its arsenal to intimidate others. In July, they threatened to incinerate Japanese cities. Soon after that, they threatened to go after Australia with nukes. They have periodically and in an unprovoked fashion threatened the United States.
China state media recently warned that a military showdown with the U.S. will come if it attempts to block China's, quote, reunification with Taiwan. These satellite images show a mock-up of a U.S. warship in the Chinese desert, believed to have been built as a training target. China expert Gordon Chang believes not only is a takeover of Taiwan imminent, the communist power won't stop there.
China is preparing to take over Taiwan, but it's also preparing to take over India, to take over Japan, to take over the world. Xi Jinping has been using themes from in China's imperial past, where Chinese emperors believed that they had not only the mandate of heaven to rule Tianxia, or all under heaven, but that heaven compelled them to do so.
Despite China's rapid military buildup, Chang says it's not too late for the U.S. to intervene. He's concerned, however, that while the military strength exists, America's leaders have not had the political will.
Well, very thankful to CBN for that news report. Again, the first from over a year ago, but give some helpful context. Reminder that we are live and interactive. Please do be sending in your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas concerning the security threat that China is posing to the West. Are we taking it seriously? That's the question that we're asking this evening. Now, it's right and fair that we actually indicate Chinese response to the Joint Security Press briefing. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman, Zhao Liqian, said British intelligence was trying to, quote, hype up the China threat theory, end quote. And he advised the head of MI5 to, quote, cast away imagined demons, end quote.
What a statement.
Yeah, it is. He also said the FBI director had also been, quote, playing up the China threat to smear and attack China, end quote, revealing a Cold War mentality, and urged him to stop making irresponsible remarks. Now, Simon, we've already just heard in the report that every 10 minutes they're opening up a new investigation into a realm of Chinese espionage in the US. That's just incredible. So it doesn't seem like it's an irresponsible claim to make.
No, and also the fact that our heads of the FBI and also MI5 have decided that they need to go public with this. That shows the magnitude of the threat that we face, because usually these security services keep things in the dark. That's what they're there to do, behind the scenes, to protect our nations from serious threats. So the fact is that they've gone public and wanting to warn business leaders and also our government not to lose sight of the threat posed by China to Taiwan. We've also seen they've also threatened this week Australia as well, is that China is becoming a menace, particularly after we saw the leaking of the lab in Wuhan that ultimately led to COVID-19 has been clearly blamed on the Communist Party of China for it. So after this, they've used this pandemic as a means to push forward their ambitions to become a world superpower. And this is their aim and this is intention. They are a totalitarian regime. Their oppression of Christians and human rights is absolutely horrific. Plus they have the most sophisticated surveillance system anywhere in the world. And if you're a Chinese citizen and you oppose the regime, you've got major problems on your hands. It's almost a future dystopian society in which the Chinese people are living through.
Ian thanks us for the great program and says, I heard there was an issue recently over China and the Solomon Islands. And indeed, there has been a pact that was made fairly recently. There are, as you can expect, different views on this, but they've had rioting in the Solomon Islands, and as I understand the pact, it's essentially giving China the responsibility and the freedom and the right to step into the Solomon Islands with military and police assistance.
They rejected it, according to Dale.
Okay.
We'll see later, but he does mention this, that they actually, the Solomon Islands rejected the protection that China was to offer them.
Okay.
That's according to Dale Hurd from CBN. Who will be on later.
Well, so we will hear from Dale and trust that Dale is correct. I pray he is, because reading between the lines of the pact that was being planned, it certainly seemed very discouraging.
There we go. So I mean, this is what is great about this program. You know, there is that famous quote by Paul Weller, the singer, that actually the more you know, the less you know.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be a truer quote, because the more you delve into this stuff, the more you realise how little you actually know. So we're presenting what we do know, and with God's help, we're able to expand upon that with the help of some good info and a good bit of research. Now, according to also this press conference, the FBI security, head of FBI security, Chris Wray, he warned the audience, which included chief executives of business and senior figures from universities, that the Chinese government was set upon stealing our technology. He says, using a range of tools, he said it posed an even more serious threat to Western businesses than even that many sophisticated business people realised. He said that the UK had toughened up its visa approvals for Chinese students to study in the country, and he said leading to 50 Chinese nationals linked to China's People's Liberation Army being asked to leave. He also then cited, without naming her, the British Chinese national, Christine Lee, a lawyer, as a subject of interference alert issued to Parliament, warning MPs of our activities on behalf of Beijing's intelligence services. He also cited cases in which people linked to the Chinese companies out in rural America had been digging up genetically modified seeds which would have cost them billions of US dollars to produce by themselves over a decade ago. It also says that China deployed cyber espionage to cheat and steal on a massive scale, with hacking program larger than any other major country combined. And the head of MI5 said that intelligence about cyber threats have been shared with 37 countries, and that in May a sophisticated threat against aerospace had been disrupted. So it just shows you the extent and the concern of our security services regarding China.
And indeed, we saw that they are modeling equipment, US military equipment, to use as target practice. Yeah. So what we're seeing is some very evident planning and plotting to even potentially enter a war. And I do believe that if China invades Taiwan, the US will probably become involved in a similar way as they have been with Russia and Ukraine, not necessarily boots on the ground or hands on, but China, I believe, will respond with a greater deal, more force, especially in regard to cyber attacks.
And this has come out because we have a very weak president in President Biden, who's currently on a 2-day tour to the Middle East and is currently meeting with Israeli leaders. Let's have a look now at a previous interview that I did, and we've given the game away. It's our good friend Dale Hurd from CBN.
Right. Our problem with Chinese interference in our problem with Chinese interference in our elections starts in the White House. The Biden family, we're now learning, is deeply involved in Chinese affairs.
Sorry, we're having slight technical problems there, so hopefully our producer Luke can sort that out, and we'll go to Dale Hurd shortly. Anything?
Yeah, again, live and interactive. Guys, please send in your thoughts, your experiences, your understanding of this Chinese security threat. Now, the troubling reality is that we actually do have individuals across the European scientific community that are empowering China's military machine.
Absolutely. Now, according to the Gatestone Institute, which is a great online publication that covers a lot of security issues, they're saying that European scientists and universities are actually empowering China's communist military machine. So the Chinese regime is attempting to take as much knowledge as possible from the US and British and Western research centres, particularly as it relates to military technology and artificial intelligence. So in the Netherlands, there were researchers who have been working on artificial intelligence linked with Huawei that we were about to have in this country back in 2019 to actually fit our new generation of the internet, 5G technology. Said that instead of working with NATO, it's the world turned upside down, and this is the David Van Weel, who is the NATO's Assistant Secretary General for Emerging Security Challenges, said this on the 23rd of May of this year, 2022, warning about that threat.
In Denmark, a Chinese military engineer claimed to have come from a Chinese research institute that did not even exist, and he had collaborated with Aalborg University in Denmark on advanced radar technology. The university carried out no security checks on him whatsoever. Surprisingly, the Chinese engineer was from the People's Liberation Army Information Engineering University. Now, doubtless, a lot of these scenarios are also leading the UK to tighten up on its security measures and its visas that it is giving out to the many Chinese foreign students who come over each year. Right now, I believe we're going to be going to that interview that Simon prepared earlier today. I hope that it will be of help to you.
Senior news correspondent for CBN based in the States. Dale, it's great to see you.
Good to see you again, Simon.
And Del, you've done so many reports through CBN, which are absolutely fabulous, really detailing and warning us about the threat that China poses to the West. Considering the vast amount of journalism that you've done, the reports you've covered, what is your assessment on the threat that China poses to the West?
Well, it's huge, and it has been huge. It could get bigger because I'm doing a story right now. I'm finishing a story on the decline of China. China is now smaller than India. Their fertility rate may be smaller than America's. Some people suspect it's a fertility rate of 1. Replacement rate is generally thought of as twice that. And their economy is dropping like a rock, which they're not reporting. And there's just a lot of headwind pushing against China, including on the foreign policy front. They had this meeting a couple of weeks ago with Pacific Island nations wanting to do a defense pact, and the islands rejected it. It was unprecedented and a big embarrassment for China. So things are not going well for Chairman Xi and China, and this could make them even more dangerous.
And Del, last week we had unprecedented security briefings held both by the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, and his British counterpart, the head of MI5 director, Ken McCallum, warning about the serious threat that China poses. In your opinion, how significant was that media briefing to actually come out in public and to warn both our nations of the danger posed by China?
Well, it could mean that what was already bad is getting worse. A couple of years ago, Christopher Wray held a press conference and said that they were opening a new counter-espionage case against China every 10 hours, and that what China had stolen only from America, he called the largest wealth transfer in world history. I mean, that there's this whale that goes through the ocean, this huge whale that opens its mouth and just sucks in all the ocean life. I don't know the name of it. I mean, that's China with the world's data. It's unprecedented.
And Del, this is a quote from Christopher Wray. He says that China was the biggest long-term threat to our economic and national security, and had also interfered in politics, including recent elections. Can you just explain to us the extent of of Chinese espionage and interference in our elections, and the menace that China poses?
Our problem with Chinese interference in our elections starts in the White House. The Biden family, we're now learning, is deeply involved in Chinese affairs. And we suspect China has a lot of leverage over the Bidens, but we don't know. The media coverage has been almost zero. And of course, the White House is not talking about it. But the Biden family has become such a problem that the White House has actually asked the Justice Department to stop issuing threat alerts related to the Biden family. It's because of Biden's brother Jim and his son Hunter and their dealings with the Chinese. And now we know that Joe is involved. Let me just tell the viewers that I think, well, I'm sure that Republicans are going to take over Congress this fall, and they're going to start probably impeachment hearings on Joe Biden simply because of his involvement with China. But China has it's wormed its way into any place it can. It's set up these Confucius institutes on college campuses, trying to spread its influence through universities. And it's tried to buy our lawmakers. And it did so with the Biden family.
That's absolutely incredible. But can you also share, whilst the West is preoccupied with Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, and the situation, as we know, it is awful, that we really can't afford to keep our eyes off what's going on in Taiwan, and particularly with the Chinese military threats to Taiwan. Can you explain how dangerous this would be if we saw a Chinese military invasion of that island in the South China Sea?
Well, it would be devastating to everyone. There would be no winners. And that's why I wonder how likely it is, because China knows that it would just hammer their economy. It was interesting in the Christopher Wray press briefing with your head of MI5 that he mentioned that China is decoupling its economy from the rest of the world. And he wonders if that's in advance of a move against Taiwan, because China doesn't want to be punished economically as badly as Russia was. But let's remember, China hasn't fought a war since I was in high school, 1978, in Vietnam. And some people think they lost. It's kind of a toss-up, but they had trouble in Vietnam. And the military is very aware of that. And you'll get this saber rattling out of China about Taiwan, I think for domestic consumption, and also because the military is very hawkish. But I think when they actually get down to it, an invasion of Taiwan would be very difficult. It's almost more likely to happen by accident because of an altercation involving, aircraft going into Taiwan and one gets shot down or something like that. But yeah, it would be devastating to the world economy.
And also, talking about the world economy, Taiwan is so important for the number of chips that it manufactures, which are vital from everything to do with our kind of electronic 21st century infrastructure. So what would the supply lines look like if China did invade Taiwan? And of course, these valuable chips that we need in our mobile phones, in our cars, don't become available. What impact would that have on the world economy and businesses around the world?
Oh, yeah. It would be devastating again. But, you brought that up, chips in Taiwan. That's actually one reason China wants to tread carefully. It would like Taiwan, but it doesn't want to destroy those factories. It can't do to Taiwan what Russia did to Ukraine. It can't just carpet bomb the island, because China actually relies on the Taiwanese chip industry. So, yeah, it would be terrible. It's interesting that the U.S. nations, but many nations, because I know the EU has now turned its back on China, which is kind of shocking because the EU doesn't usually stand for much, but even they've had enough of China, and nations are pulling out. This is a big trend, and this is part of China's economy sinking, are all the nations that are pulling their operations out of China because China is becoming harder to deal with. Labor is not as cheap, and I think because they see the handwriting on the wall that it's not going to get better.
And also, do you think that what we're seeing now is, why is the world taking this seriously now when Joe Biden is in the White House, when the previous occupant, President Trump, warned in 2018, 2019 about the threat from China? Why didn't they take him seriously then, but now are actually only taking it seriously now, 2 years after Wuhan and COVID-19?
I think you know the answer. I mean,
yeah, well, I don't know if our viewers do. So, from your perspective,
I have never seen a media like ours so obsessed with a man, Donald Trump, and they're running these bogus January 6th hearings right now, and one of them stated the purpose is to prevent Donald Trump from ever running for president again. Well, he is, and he's going to be the next president. That's my prediction. Again, he's going to be president again. But yeah, Donald Trump says something. It's a joke. He's a warmonger. He's a clown. We have video you've seen on social media of him warning the Germans that they're headed for trouble getting their natural gas from Russia. He did this years ago, and there's video of their delegation at the UN laughing at him, and Russia's turned off the gas. So yeah, Joe Biden, who is, we're not sure he's even all there mentally. If he says something, if he does something, the media is on board with it. And he's going to want to act tough toward China because he's involved with China. And there are all kinds of allegations that they have leverage on him.
Dale, tell us about the extent of China's stealing of innovation and secret military technology. I mean, if we look at one thing, for example, that recently they dug up genetically modified seeds in rural America that would have cost them a decade, billions of pounds in research to actually develop, stealing all our latest technology. And until now, we're only just waking up to it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're stealing everything. But you know what? People in the West are giving them a lot, and it's not costing them anything. And it's called an app called TikTok. Okay, this is a data miner people have on their phones. And I'm telling the viewers, you should try to get anyone you care about to get this app off their phone, because it will drain all the data off a phone. And millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world are using this app. And China is obsessed with obtaining information about as many people from as many nations as it can, including genetic information, which they have. We know they have stolen the genetic information of Americans from poorly, kept IT systems.
Absolutely incredible. And also, 2 weeks ago here in London, we had our former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, big globalist, announce his globalist conference called the Future for Britain, in which they were advocating that we should import China's mass surveillance system, which looks nothing like looks like the mark of the beast, Big Brother, and to incorporate that into the West. What are your concerns about if that happens to our individual freedoms and also our freedoms as Christians to be able to vote and to go to church without being monitored and controlled by the state?
Yeah, any technology that's bought from China, you have to assume technology like that. You have to assume there's a backdoor to the Chinese military. This was the case with Huawei's 5G, had a backdoor in it, and any surveillance equipment in Britain is going to send data to the People's Republic of China and their army.
And finally, Dale, can you just give us a little bit of an update on the plight of the persecuted church in China, and what is the latest situation regarding them and being oppressed by the Chinese Communist Party?
It's gotten worse under Chairman Xi, and they're again listed as one of the worst human rights violators in the world. But I want to encourage people. At the 50th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi said nothing can stop the Chinese nation. And I feel that he shook his fist at God, and that was the beginning of a lot of the current troubles we see for China. And I think prayers will be answered. And God hears the prayers of the Chinese church. It's growing exponentially. And I think that there are good things ahead for the church in China, despite the current persecution.
Excellent. Dale, just appreciate you giving us up your valuable time. Please keep up the excellent reports that you're doing. And I'll tell our viewers that we really need to keep you in prayers because you're doing a fantastic job. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon.
Pleasure.
Very thankful for that interview there. Good stuff, Simon, and thankful for Dale and the helpful insights. We have this insightful question: is there evidence of COVID being started deliberately by the Chinese Communist Party? It wouldn't surprise me. Now, it's an interesting question because some people have raised that whether they deliberately started it in a biological weapon-like way, and there has been evidence that has pointed to that possibility anyway. They definitely, in their reaction, influenced the rest of the world. And how China shut down everything, the rest of the world then followed suit because they set a somewhat of a moral precedent in one way. They reacted in such a severe way, and then Italy reacted in a very severe way, and then everyone looks and thinks, oh, we need to act in the same way or we're horrible.
Yeah, looking at the evidence and having read a lot of kind of news reports, also security briefings on this issue, I don't think it was actually deliberate. I think China has got a kind of history of leaks in their labs. And don't forget, in China, they don't have a moral compass. So anything is possible in terms of their experimentation with exotic diseases and everything else to biotechnology. Nothing is out of bounds. There is no ethics.
There's blending of human and animal embryo stuff.
Exactly. So there are no ethics. So what it seems to happen is that there was a leak, probably in September of 2019, because we also had the military games take place in Wuhan, and those military soldiers who took part in those games in October of 2019 were saying how Wuhan was shut down. They were wearing masks, and people and athletes got very, very sick. But it wasn't until kind of early January of 2020 did the Communist Party of China reveal that COVID was on the march. So instead of shutting their country down and warning the World Health Organization, they encouraged so many of their citizens to fly out the country and spread the virus around the world. So China used the pretext of the COVID-19 global pandemic as an opportunity to hit the United States, damage the American and the economy of the West, and propel themselves into a position of power and influence. What was also extraordinary in that interview I did with Dale Hurd earlier this afternoon was the fact that we got an exclusive here on Revelation TV, because what he was saying in that interview is saying that if, and it looks very likely that the Republicans are going to take the Senate and the Congress in the midterm elections in November, that the Republican Party will use the issue of China and how Biden, his son Hunter Biden, and his brother are so much in the pay and the influence of the Chinese regime that they will use that to impeach him. I mean, you heard it here first. I mean, that's an exclusive story.
We'll be very much keeping an eye on that as it develops. There's also the question asking whether or not they're powering our network, i.e. Huey. Now, you may remember that the UK government actually is in the process of removing all of Huey's technology from the network by 2027. So that's the end goal, to have removed all of Huey's equipment from 5G networks by the end of 2027. They will not be installing Huey equipment in 5G networks effective immediately upon the issuing of final direction. There's a plan to remove all Huey equipment from the core of telecoms networks by 28th of January 2023. And then there's a few other elements, but basically they're removing this influence. The problem is, a lot of this stuff that Simon and I are talking about this evening has been known for a while. It's just not been shared publicly by security agencies. And they built so much of this network using Huey.
Yeah, because the Chinese are very clever. I mean, what they've done, and this is in terms of their kind of business strategy, and they've used this as their military strategy as well. They say, look, we can provide you with the new 5G internet technology. We'll provide all the equipment, cheaper than any other competitor on the market, so you have a good rate. And in that, they actually have security flaws to actually sweep up as much intelligence, data and information as they can. And we also heard as well the use of TikTok, which is very, very popular with Generation Z, isn't it? And that is the app to go to. So what they do on there, according to Dale Hurd and others, even President Trump warned Americans not to have it, is that it just data mines your phone, and everything you got on the phone goes back to the Chinese regime. Yeah. So mass surveillance over the entire population of the world, and very, very dangerous.
Anita says, evening Simon and Reagan. Yes, China are a real worry. Almost everything is made in China now, and China are very adept at spying on people. It's very worrying. The MI5 website concluded their recent report on the China threat with this comment. The UK's innovators and technologists, our researchers and scientists, our business people are one of the UK's greatest strengths. That's why you're being targeted. Let's not let your success be China's competitive advantage. Let's take on this challenge together. Thank you. We are seeing what we would expect in these end days, though, so I will keep praying. Psalm 118:8, it is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans. Absolutely, and bless you as well, Anita. Hi guys, love the program. Am I correct in assuming that the lab in Wuhan was funded by the Obama administration?
I believe that's correct as well, because they knew that they couldn't do the scientific research they wanted because of the moral standards and ethics in the United States. So that got transferred to work in the lab in Wuhan. So yeah, I believe that is correct as far as I'm aware.
This question is asked, hasn't the current US government also entered an agreement with China for China to enter the US as peacekeeper if there's civil unrest? God bless. I have not, that is not on the cards at all. I think you may be thinking again back to that potential deal that was being worked on with the Solomon Islands. But yeah, definitely not the US. The US has actually done the opposite in this particular situation and scenario. Now, back to some of those scientists who are empowering China's military machine as we begin to wrap up. According to one of Britain's leading experts in high-tech weapons, Professor Clive Woodley from Imperial College London, one of the British universities that has received the most funding from China, had been freely working with China for years. Most of Woodley's research has been funded by the Ministry of Defense. He has advised the Ministry of Defense about many of its key lethal systems. This is according to David Rose, investigative journalist for Unheard, published May 21st, 2022. Adapting to a world affected by the rise of China is the single greatest priority for MI6. Richard Moore, UK spy chief and the head of MI6, Sky News, November 30th, 2021. So this goes back a few months. And then new research done by Follow the Money, a Dutch platform for investigative journalism, and 10 other European media outlets found that European scientists have shared militarily sensitive knowledge with the Chinese army on a large scale.
What's extraordinary though, Reagan, if we go back 40 years, you know, China had no navy, China had no ballistic continental missiles. They had no nuclear weapons. They weren't a world economic superpower. And effectively, the West, through its greed, has empowered China by investing so much financial capital in China during the 90s that we're seeing that they've used that, and then they've stolen all of our innovations, our technology, and to build a highly advanced, sophisticated, futuristic, but also dystopian society. And so they are light years away from us in terms of technology and innovation.
Now, the threats that we face in security, they are across a range of places. We see there's some interconnectivity between Russia and China working together, and NATO is now concerned about this threat. Their documents have expanded a strategic vision significantly beyond Russia by identifying dangers from outside the European continent. The threats we face are global and interconnected, they say. Authoritarian actors challenge our interest, values, and democratic way of life. The People's Republic of China China's stated ambitions and coercive policies challenge our interests, security, and values. And they don't explicitly mention the February China-Russia joint statement that effectively declared a new Cold War against the West. And even as we were talking about, Russia held off its invasion till after the Chinese Olympics. But they do say that the deepening strategic partnership between the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, they're mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut the rules-based international order run counter to our values and interests.
Absolutely, and it's also important to mention, we've mentioned this on Behind the Headlines before, that the book of Revelation refers to the kings of the East amassing a multi-million plus army that crosses over the River Euphrates in Iraq because it dries up on its way to Armageddon. So we know that China is a major player in the end times and has come to the fore and is a threat against the West. But the good news is there are so many born-again believers in China, and that's why we got to continue to pray for our brothers and sisters who face unprecedented persecution, together with the Uyghurs, and pray that obviously this vile regime in China collapses, because if they come against the God of Israel, then they are no match at all for the God of Israel. So in summing up, China poses a major security threat to the West. We need to keep this in our prayers because it's important. But I want to thank you for watching tonight's edition of Behind the Headlines.